A potting shed can be so much more than a place to plant. Today's little garden houses run the gamut from practical to adorable, and many are both. We'll look at a selection of them and what they're used for, plus a stroll through the gardens on Hanging Horn Lake, straight ahead on Great Gardening.
Every tree has a moment when it shines.
That's called moneywort or creeping Jenny.
You can go in and do a rejuvenating pruning.
Forage and feed for our native pollinator population.
A garden really gives you peace of mind.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm Pamela Fish. Happy to be seeing so much green in the landscape. And I'm also happy to see our garden experts back on the set. They are Bob Olin, horticulturist and educator with St. Louis County Extension, and Tom Casper from the Duluth Garden Flower Society and Duluth Community Garden Program. And it's not just green we're seeing out there. You guys are telling me about some things that are blooming.
Right, but first you described in your description of the garden sheds, Bob and I. He's practical.
You're adorable.
Oh, okay.
I had to, sorry.
Or maybe you're both a little of both.
There you go.
All right, okay.
Sorry about that.
Again, what's blooming out there right now?
Well, there's lots of things coming into bloom and really leafing out, even with today's rain, which has just been really at a perfect pace. So
It's kind of fun to watch a lot of the perennials, the trees and shrubs, they're just breaking forward. I really don't think there was much damage this year from the winter kill like we saw the previous year. So we're looking forward to a good spring.
You're looking good.
Want to be a little careful. We got this wonderful rain, but we got cooler temperatures in the forecast. So we want to watch this over the next week or so.
All right. Well, we also want to welcome our phone volunteers from the Duluth Garden Flower Society Mount Royal Garden Club. They're standing by to answer your called-in questions. You can reach them at 218-788-2844 or call the toll-free number 877-307-8762. Give them your questions and they will bring them here to us and our garden experts. Or you could also email askgardening@wdse.org. Well, again, tonight we're talking about garden sheds, and is that something that you guys rely upon in the garden, or are you more garage guys?
Go ahead, Tom. Mr. Adorable.
well, both of mine are full. The garage
The
and
shed
the shed.
and the garage
yes.
are full, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could get my equipment in a shed, but I love them. Don't get me wrong. It's just a size issue.
And there's a lot of them out there, and they are handy little houses, and they're used for work and for play, and often crafted as decor for the garden. They also house plants, tools, supplies, and sometimes animals. Here are just a few examples. From the playhouse, set for tea beside a flower and plant-lined babbling brook, to the souped-up coop where the chickens scratch and lay. The garden shed has become a cherished fixture in the landscape.
I had it built for me. It was wonderful this spring when it was so cold out. I could just come out here and pot away and leave the plants in here. We should have bought the window boxes. I am so happy with them. You know, they were, the verbena just, right now it's in between bloom, but this was just stunning.
Started out as a project for the school carpentry class one spring to build a garden shed.
Cheetah says once the students framed it up, his brother helped finish it with doors, windows, and a metal roof.
And it gets hot in there. It's set to come on at 80, and there's a fan blowing out the other side. Annuals and garden plants, but she starts them there in the spring.
This custom-built potting shed is fashioned with an attached home for the hens and comes complete with lighting and some artwork. This one was originally built by the gardener's father as her playhouse, then later moved to serve as a playhouse for her children, and relocated and redecorated once more as the focal point of a new garden bed.
My husband Ron built the shed for me, and it's his own design. There's a sitting area that doesn't get a lot of use, but it's fun, and some records. I've got some old chairs that were his great aunts that are in there, and an old wicker chair for my family, and some kind of just fun things and some books and some resource reference materials. And it's just a fun place for me to gather all my gardening things in there.
We will be back to Chris Carlson's in Barnum for a tour later on. My question is, how much time is really spent in those cute little sheds? Because, you know, gardeners, you can't sit still, right?
Except on days like this where there's a little bit of moisture.
When there's a little moisture,
and
yes.
they're beautiful, beautiful sheds,
Have
great examples.
Open a book in there, yeah, those are cute. All right, well now it's time for questions from our viewers, and we had a few that were emailed in, and here's one from Ellen in Superior. She has in her lawn a ring of dead grass, and she said it's been there for a couple of years. It's 12 to 20 inches, and she tried treating it, tried reseeding it, was told it was cinch bugs or maybe a fungus, but has had no luck taking care of it.
No luck at all. Well, that sounds like typically a fairy ring. I'm glad she mentioned this. So cinch bug gets a lot of credit for damage that it doesn't actually do. So people should be careful when that diagnosis comes up. We can talk about that maybe later, but it's going to be a late summer warm season thing. Sounds like it's a mushroom issue. Fairy ring is an underground fungi that actually lives off the grass tissue. So it's really a saprophyte, lives off a lot of the dead tissue and so forth. And the only way she's going to really get rid of it is to destroy the dead tissue that's down there, and you do that typically by accelerating the decomposition rate. So I generally recommend a little additional real soluble fertilizer, and the high nitrogen fertilizer, water it in, and that will accelerate the decomposition of the decaying material that that particular fungi is living on.
All right, good.
So fertilize the lawn.
Yeah, with a little extra there, and make sure it gets watered in. You may want to pull some cores and get it right down where that dead material is.
Okay, well, good luck, Ellen. Mary from Washburn says her daffodils were prolific last year more than this year. She did let the leaves remain in place long after turning brown, but they're not doing so well. Should she dig them up, separate the bulbs, and replant?
And daffodils, like tulips, you really need to be continually replacing those or replanting them in the fall. Most of our hybrid kinds of things really only have a certain amount of life to them and will last a few years. But also, the type of winter we had this past winter with very little to no snow cover is certainly affecting some of those things. We talked about not seeing a lot of damage above ground, but probably seeing some in things like that below ground. So,
you know, daffodils, Tom, are one of those spring flowering bulbs that will naturalize easier than tulips. But as you say, particularly some of the new hybrids, they just don't want to, they're not really perennials in this area.
Is that true too of narcissus, hyacinth, crocuses? Do those have to be replaced?
You should every year, but some of them will do better than others. Crocuses seem to do better and have a greater tolerance to the cold. You don't have to plant them as deep. The things you may want to look at is even planting them a little deeper. 5 to 6 inches at the minimum should be where they're planted. So,
all right.
And another key is just making sure during the growing season that they grow well, because they do in fact have to store extra sugars to get through the winter and to set bulbs and so forth. So good growing during the growing season, and then a little protection if need be, and some of these will do pretty well.
And I think you've said before that you keep the greens on for a while even after the flower blooms are gone.
And she mentioned that.
She did that, yeah.
She did that and let those die down, which is really what you want to do. So.
Okay. Great. Linda from Saginaw is looking for some strawberry plants or bare root stock, wants recommendations for Zone 3, and a couple that she was looking for but couldn't find were the Masabi or the Winona strawberry.
Both nice varieties introduced by the University of Minnesota. Probably mail order would be the only source, and she's probably not going to be able to find them this late. Everyone's already got them planted. In terms of Zone 3 varieties, she probably wants to go back to, we had a great variety, Glooskamp, but that one has fallen away because of disease issues. So I think I'll give her a couple, Kent, Honey Eye, and Cavendish. And those are varieties that will do real well in Zone 3. You're going to have to cover to protect the flower buds with straw, but you have to do that everywhere. But those are 3 to look for. And she may have to shop in some of the catalogs just a little earlier because the season starts a little bit farther south earlier than it does up here.
And one thing she may want to do is the Duluth Community Gardening Program has their fruit tree and shrub sale going on right
go
now.
online and look for them there.
Well, she could go to the farmer's market on Saturday. There's a couple other suppliers there, and I know that they have some strawberries.
You do? Okay, there you go. There's a good tip. All right, let's see. Lori from Culver has daylilies, is wondering, is it too early or too late to move from one garden bed to another?
Can do it right now.
Okay, great.
And actually, daylilies are one of those plants you can move just
can't
about
kill them,
any.
right?
Yeah,
They're pretty tough, yes.
So she can move them just about any time. So.
I like them, but my mother says she just can't stand them and can't get rid of them. So. Ron in Ely wants to know about adding lime to lilacs. Should you, when, and how much?
Oh, I don't think that you should add any lime at all to lilacs, unless he's taken a soil test which indicates that lime is required. They're going to do just fine in a neutral or slightly acidic soil, and actually you can push that pH too high, too hard, and then you have to try to work its way back down. So he really doesn't want lime on his lilacs.
Okay, and that reminds me, Tom, you said there were some lilacs blooming in town.
Yeah, I've seen lilacs in a couple different spots that have flower heads that are about that big and just starting to open, which is exciting. I mean, last year we didn't see lilacs in bloom till mid-June.
Right.
And here we are early May. So
That's great.
Great
Okay.
year.
Cheryl from Duluth is a first-time gardener. What are some easy-to-grow plants?
First of all, welcome, Cheryl.
Yes.
Welcome to
to the
our
gardening community. And I want to know the answer to this too.
Sometimes we feel like first-time gardeners all the time, too.
Well, no, I think no matter what you grow, it's the amount of effort that you put into it, and accepting that there's going to be successes and failures with any garden, no matter how easy the plant or how difficult the plant. So I think she should pace herself and grow what she likes, whether it's fruits or vegetables or flowers or daylilies.
There may be a good example.
Yeah, start with some of those things like daylilies that are easy to grow, or one of my favorites, bee balm, if she's into flowers. And
Bleeding heart is pretty easy.
Bleeding
It
hearts,
always seems to come
hostas.
back for me.
Yep.
Hostas are easy.
For shady areas, definitely. Definitely.
Sure.
We talked about some of the sedum last
Right.
week. Some of those hen and chicks and so forth are really pretty easy to grow. And everything else you'll have to pick and choose. I think one of the best things you can do is just kind of hook up with a neighbor or someone that has an interest
Yes.
and then just plant what they've been successful with and what you really feel happy with.
And what you can dig out of their garden at night.
That's right.
Just kidding.
What plants could or would be great to grow to create a butterfly garden? That's from Lindy in Duluth.
Well, and Bob talked about the start into the show is about providing plants for native pollinators. From a perennial standpoint, certainly bee balm that I just mentioned is outstanding for butterflies, black-eyed Susan, coneflower, daisies, all those kinds of things that have that composite style head or flower that really works well for. And then, of course, a lot of the vegetables that go into seed or into flower and stuff. So
Raspberries and so forth. I think that one thing that people might want to look for is even some of the old-fashioned varieties that you might get from your neighbor's garden, maybe not after the sun goes down, but some of the older varieties that haven't been hybridized, actually there's more pollen and there's more nectar there because in some cases we've looked just for the bloom and kind of minimized the production of pollen and nectar. So even some of the old varieties are exceptional, and natives, of course.
And a swamp milkweed is one that they recommend for monarchs. Am I correct with that?
Monarchs, right,
Yeah.
right, and that's been one of the big issues. And once again, you don't want that down in the swamp. You want it on a better site if you're going to be successful, hot and dry, typically.
And look for plants that bloom in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, because really different times of the season we have different butterflies that are visiting our gardens. So.
And the other thing, since we're in this, this is tonight's program, no big blocks, I think. If people want to plant, you mentioned that full season of color, and not just a single plant. Plant 3 or 4 of them so you have a block so that the butterflies can actually find and locate these. But there's a lot of interest in something the homeowner can really do to help alleviate some of the problems that some of our butterflies and other pollinators are having. You can plant for them, yes.
Great answers, more questions to come, but right now it's time for our weekly garden tour. And we visit the home of a master gardener who has gardened in a few different Minnesota locations, but now she's located on a lake in Carleton County.
Hi, I'm Chris Carlson. You are in Barnum, on Big Hanging Horn Lake, and welcome to my garden. Right now I've got a lot of lilies coming out, oriental lilies. My daylilies are still behind because of our season. A lot of things are slow. It's an unusual season. Lots of coneflowers this week have opened. I was going to go with a color scheme, and it didn't work out. I think I could do a little better on the colors, but in nature, everything goes together, I think. That one came through this tough winter better than some of the Zone 3 things do. I have another smoke bush over here that's a Zone 3, and that had to be cut in half. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting what things survive. And some of them are made by my dad, which makes it special as a memory to him. It's just fun for me to add accents in the garden. I have made mosaic pots. That's what those are there on the table. I dabbled in mosaics and made stepping stones for my grandchildren's names. The Heliopsis came out earlier this year than normal. Things were kind of unique this year. It is a miniature hollyhock. And there's another little different variety too. They look almost the same, but they're different. One's called Party Girl and this Purpetta. But I enjoy that. I don't see that in that many gardens. It's a centuriae, I think you say it. It's a relative of the bachelor button. It's very funky. When it comes out, it looks like a cone. But it's nice. It does spread quite a bit, but it's different, and it's good for the back of the border, something different. I do well with Russian sage here too. This is bittersweet over here on the arbor. Hops growing on my arbor, not as vigorous as other years, but we're starting to make it. Usually that's all covered, and that makes it a nicer, shadier spot. I started gardening for myself when my kids were little, because I had to be outside with supervising them, and I kept digging up the yard. This plant I particularly enjoyed. It's kind of unusual. It's a fleece flower, Japanese. It doesn't flower, but it just adds such contrast in the garden that I enjoy. And it's teamed up with Regerzia next door to it. And so, so far it's been well behaved for me. I've got a rose tree that's in bloom right now. That's a new thing for me, a Zone 3. I'm looking forward to watching that grow. And I had this idea to have this old wagon wheel that I got in an antique store, and to just try different kinds of sedum. My dad made the bench for me down there, so that's special. And my husband built the stairway, and it was dictated somewhat by the roots that he encountered. 87 stairs. One more would be a piano, a keyboard. Gardening's really tangible. You can really see progress. And I love being outside. It's an excuse to be outside.
And we feel very fortunate that we get to go to Chris's garden on our garden bus tour this summer in July.
That'll be fun. Looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to it a lot. Okay, a lot of questions here, guys. Should we get back to it?
Sure.
Dee Dee from Meadowlands has Creeping Charlie, is pulling it up, but how do you dispose of it?
It's kind of interesting, because we've also had questions from people about non-grass ground covers.
Paul wants to know a perennial ground cover for lawns with shade, Zone 3, that isn't grass. Creeping Charlie, right?
Perfect. Zone 3,
So
good
Dee
and
Dee,
hardy,
could you
grows
get
well in
together
the
with Paul?
shade.
Yeah.
We'll just exchange plants. Actually, Creeping Charlie or ground ivy was introduced as a ground cover, and then it just got away. It's just like buckthorn was introduced as a hedge that got away. So now a lot of people want to control. There are some chemical controls. It's shallow rooted. If she really wants to spend the time, she certainly can dig it out, and I think that would be an option. But replace that area and opening up for a little bit more sun. If not, controlling in the fall with, there are labeled herbicides for control.
And I think she's wondering, I think she might be wondering, do I need to burn it, or what do you do with it?
Well, you know, it's going to root very readily. So
Wherever
I
you
would,
put it, it's going to grow, right?
you know, the seeds aren't going to be a huge issue, but I think if you were to put it in a well-managed compost pile, deep in the pile where you're running hot temperatures, it shouldn't be an issue.
All right.
And certainly another option for Paul, who's asking about non-grass ground covers for
Right.
shade. If it's not too heavy a shade, thyme is a good perennial. It did die back a little bit this year. It likes more sun. It's going to take a long time to cover, but it would do okay in a location like that. So.
Okay. Debbie from Duluth wants to know if you guys know anything about kitchen scrap composters called bokashi, is I think how you pronounce it. It's an anaerobic fermentation process developed in Japan, but new in the U.S. She found it online. Heard anything about that?
You know, I've heard of the anaerobics, and you know, you can break these things down, and I'm not real familiar with that system. You may be, Tom,
I'm
but
not either.
it's anaerobic, meaning that it's sealed and it's contained, so there really isn't going to be any odor associated with it. But by the same token, a lot of people will compost scraps inside if you got a warm enough location, and if you keep it aerobic, there shouldn't be too much odor either.
Okay.
But the big point is garden scraps are valuable, and we turn them into compost, and compost is valuable.
Yeah.
So rather than putting things in the landfill, we go ahead and reuse it.
Yeah.
We
The
have-
art of fermentation.
We have another compost question about from Brenda in Brookston about, do you have to use a bin for compost?
You don't really have to. I mean, it's nice to contain it, and certainly if you're going through the process of where you're putting newly cut garden scraps to where you're turning it to your end product, it's kind of nice to do that to keep it separated. That way you're continually sort of moving your pile through the system. So
You know, the bins look nice, and at one time I checked a lot of them when there was a real theme and there were products out all over the place, and what I found is that, and it almost shocked me, but nothing works as well as a properly managed 5-foot pile. It's got to be large. The one drawback of the bins is during the winter months. Maybe winter's gone for another 3 or 4 months here, but we don't know. We'll see what happens next week. But the smaller bins tend to freeze up pretty quickly, where
Sure.
larger bins are going to be more effective, and just a large pile will be self-insulating, and you can compost into the winter months.
Okay. Now with this question, we had a picture, so you're going to see it in just a second here. It was from Patty in Solon Springs. She had 2 evergreen shrubs like this. They were severely damaged during the winter of 13, 14. Wondering, are they a total loss? Could I cut them to ground level? Do I do it now? When do I do it? What should I do?
yeah, pretty rough condition. That's a yew, or probably the variety Taunton yew. And really no chance, or very little chance, of that area that's been damaged recovering. So her best option is, in my mind, would be to probably replace that.
Okay.
I mean, the growth will continue. You can see the buds already developing on the green part of it, but there will not be any growth coming from the burn part of it. So.
Agree. Prune at ground level and replace.
Yeah.
And replace, okay. Nancy from Babbitt wants to know, can you start a hydrangea from seed?
Sure.
When
Yep.
do you do that?
Well, it would have been better to have done it a few months ago and get it going if she can get viable seed. A little bit difficult to get them, but certainly worth a try just for the fun of it. People are really into that, and giving it a try just to see if it will work.
But
So-
once again, a lot of hybridization going on with hydrangeas, so stick with the old-fashioned, the snowball bushes, the PGs. They've been around for a while, and that seed should be viable, and rather than some of the new hybrid stuff, which you don't know what you're going to get when you
Okay.
germinate.
Nancy from Babbitt wants to know when to plant eggplant. And is there a special fertilizer? What's hardy for zone 3?
Wow, lots of eggplant questions. I think it's a vegetable that's overlooked in this area. I think there's a lot of potential.
I love eggplant.
Yeah, I think that she had a lot of questions. Zone 3, she wants to look for short season. It's frost sensitive. It's in the pepper family, so she'll want to be certain that the danger of frost is past. So we're probably looking at late May, early June. Zone 3 varieties that are short season, she's probably going to have to look at something like Nadia and Galena are 2 that I've grown that are very successful. Epic would be another one that I think will give you a nice fruit within our growing season.
Great. Okay, good luck with the eggplant. What are some hardy perennials for the Duluth area? That's from Randy in Duluth.
Well, we mentioned a few of those for our question before of somebody that's just getting started. Certainly bee balm and black-eyed Susan, coneflower, sedum, hostas. You mentioned bleeding hearts. There's really hundreds and hundreds of them to choose from, and really depending on where Randy lives, if he's zone 3 or zone 4, so close to the lake or further away from the lake, look for varieties that are in that spectrum, and he should have pretty good success.
Okay, and some plant sales coming up too to head to, just
Yeah,
because the locals
a lot
bring
of
their
good
plants
local
there.
material, and they divide them up, and it's a good way to get started for sure.
Okay, is it too late to dig up rose bushes to move them or transplant them? That's from Linda in Duluth.
Well, if she can get as much of it as possible, it's not too late at all.
Okay.
So.
All right. Let's see, Rose from Chisholm had a beautiful azalea at Easter time, but now it turned brown and shed its leaves. What's happening there?
Ooh, I don't like that. I think there could have been winter damage in that particular case. So many of the azaleas are really not hardy, and sometimes they'll pop the buds and then they fall off immediately. So not a real good sign. If she needs to replace, she'll know in a short time whether it's live or not. Then look again for the Northern Lights series, good and hardy.
Okay, all right, good luck with that. Well, right now it's time to share with you some photos of this year's new spring growth and some favorites from last summer. Spring is most certainly showing its glory. This gold-caught apricot at Bloom in Bayfield is one fine example, photographed by our own Tom Casper. Tom also shot this PJM rhododendron at Bloom in Duluth. Here's a look at some of last summer's favorite lilies from Sandy Keeley in Buell. And the kind of snowballs we love in the summer on this lush hydrangea shrub. This spring tree frog is perched on a pot in the South Range, Wisconsin container garden of Charlene Peterson. And the Jorgensens of Carlton call these their chemo frogs, as they found them on Gail's peony last summer about the time she was having cancer chemotherapy treatment. Walter sent the photo to friends, saying the chemo was making them both a little green. He says Gail is doing well now and back in the gardens. Be sure to send in your own great photos and stories to share. Glad to hear a happy ending to that gardener's story. If you have stories, as we said, please share them with us. But we have to end our show here now. We're all done. Thanks, you guys, for all your great information. Thank you to our phone volunteers from Duluth Garden Flower Society, Mount Royal, and to all of you who called in. We really appreciate it, and we want to thank you for watching and hope you get out there and enjoy the garden.